Okay, welcome everyone to our concatenation event. Today it's hard to believe it's almost the end of February already, but it is almost the end of February, and we have our concatenation event. I'm going to turn it over to our ConCon coordinator, John Hart, and he's going to do some formal not invitations, introductions. There we go. So go ahead, John. I'll let you take it away from here.
Alrighty, thanks, Steve. I just wanted to welcome everybody and let you know that this is just one of a series of events. We have events all the way until May 8th, if you can believe that. So we still got a few months of events left. I'm going to take an opportunity real quick to tell you about what the purpose of this is. We formed this in 2015-16 to talk about popular culture and bring science to science math to people through popular culture. So this year we have reanimation, and this is what we call the slow con because it's so long. It's like every week, slowly like an iceberg, traveling through time. So we got together, and the slow con has just had several events, but reanimation is our theme this year. So we've had a variety of stuff from zombies to Frankenstein to the birth of the universe. And today we're going to be talking about basically how people respond to people with disabilities and identity through the metaphor of Frankenstein with our guest, Jim Ansaldo from the University of Indiana. But before we get to that, I want to just give the professors, to me, they're on the left and right of me. That's probably not how they are anyway else, but let them introduce themselves and their role at the college. So Steve Tuckey, if you'd start, and then we'll throw it over to Steve Albie Scott.
Sure. I'm Steve Tuckey. I'm a professor of mathematics and also natural science at the college, and I've been there for about 10 years now, Steve. I think we've been there for 10 years, about 10 years. And we've been putting together different conventions and community events. But it was really when we started kind of fusing together our interest in science, popular culture, comic books, movies, television, and also kind of reaching out to the larger community that we were able to kind of start to put together these ConCon events. And this year is, as with most things in the last year, it's been kind of weird because we're doing everything virtually, but it's turned out to be a really cool experience where we get to kind of tune in for a little bit once in a while and share, and then kind of revisit some ideas throughout the year. So I've really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward today. Steve, why don't you say something?
So my name's Stephen Albie Scott. I'm in biology and environmental science, earth sciences. And sort of piggybacking off what Steve said is we really are interested in sort of connecting that sort of creative outlet that everyone obviously has and the different perspectives that each of those individuals bring to science and science fiction for that matter. So yeah, that's pretty much why I think this is just awesome. So I'm going to turn it back over to John and he can do his thing.
All righty, thank you. So I just let you know, we've done some events already this year. We've recorded them. They're available on our website, which is jacksonconcon.org. I'll throw it in the chat, or somebody can. You can go and visit any recorded things, and you can find some recorded planetarium shows, an electricity session with Professor Zania Payne. You can find a drawing session of Frankenstein the monster from the 70s, Frankenstein with John McCrae. They're just rich stuff. There's tons of stuff on there, and there's more to come. There's been a couple of original movies made, and we're going to be putting those on there as well. So without much further ado, I just also wanted to acknowledge that this is a co-sponsorship with the other place that I work, which is Disability Connections, and it is the Center for Independent Living for Jackson, Lenawee, and Hillsdale. And it sounds like people live there, but they don't. It's to get people to live as independently as they want and are able through peer services. That means people with disabilities, and then also different equipment to help people stay in the home, and other services to get people out of nursing homes and institutional settings. So there's a lot of stuff there, and I'll post the website there, but we've been promoting through our Facebook page and our website and our constant contact. And I'm the executive director there, and I've been there working there as the director for about a year, but I've been there for 7.5 years as a staff person. So, and that's kind of how we ran it. Perfect segue. If you didn't notice, perfect segue. That's how we kind of ran into Jim Ansaldo. They, in the state of Indiana, they did a Frankenstein talk book, and we kind of went there and looked, and there we've got another person from the University of Indiana that will be getting with us in April, and she'll be talking about science and science fiction in Frankenstein specifically. But what we wanted to talk with Jim today is we're going to be talking about basically people's reaction to differences in other people through improvisation. So we thought, wow, what a great marriage of these things. And a quick introduction about Jim is Jim's a research scientist with a Center of Education and Lifelong Learning called CEL at the Indiana Institute on Disability and Community at the Indiana University in Bloomington. And he's conducted research there for over 20 years and has supported school change efforts and facilitated teacher professional learning about applied improvisation. And his personal statement, he says, I have a strong passion for work that includes all stakeholders and challenges deficit orientations. My passion involves using techniques for improvisational theater to support academic and social emotional learning for youth with disabilities. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jim. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Steve. And thanks everybody else for being here. It's great to be here. Really fun to bring this program back. As John said, this was created in 2018 as Indiana celebrated the 200th anniversary of the publication of Frankenstein. And this is my first time bringing it online. And I've had a lot of fun and challenge in bringing improv online over the past year. And there's a lot of great stuff about it that I hope you'll enjoy today. Just quickly, let's see, I want to do one thing. I'm going to put my email there in the chat. Feel free to get in touch with me at any time if you have questions or thoughts or want to learn more. John gave a great introduction. The only thing I'll add to it is to let everybody know that as part of my work, I'm really lucky to co-direct a summer camp called Camp Yes And. There's our website. And this is a camp where we teach improvisation, improvisational theater as a way to strengthen communication and social skills and really change the teaching learning environment. And hopefully you'll get a little bit of a picture of that today. I mention it because anybody who's interested in this kind of stuff, come to camp. It's 5 days, Monday through Friday. We're doing it online again this summer. We found some real strengths to doing it online. We also are looking forward to getting back in person, but we'll probably keep online programming since we found it to be so successful. So if you can come to Indiana in 2022, come to Indiana. You can learn a bunch of improv techniques, get to work directly with high school students on the spectrum and see how this all kind of works firsthand. It's a free experience. So go to our website, join our mailing list, all that good stuff. So very quickly, if you would type in the chat and tell me about your experience with improv. It could be none, it could be some, it could be lots. It could be any synonym to those words. None, some, or lots. Just give me a quick picture. None, none. Great. I love introducing people to improv. It's my favorite thing. Very little, some, none. I'm a jazz drummer. Hey, nice. All right, Steve. Yeah, none. Okay. More people, feel free to chime in at any time. Give me a picture. Audience member, great. So Heather's seen improv shows. John's done some leadership activities. Kathy's got a son who's a stand-up comedian. That must have been a lot of fun while you were parenting that child. As both the youngest child in my family and a future improviser, I bless my parents for their patience. So before we get into the content, I want to just talk a little bit about improvisational theater. A really quick definition is that improv is theater that's made up on the spot. So just like any play or musical you would go to see, except that it's made up during the moment of performance, usually from one or more audience suggestions. And people are most used to seeing improv as a form of comedy. So maybe it's Whose Line Is It Anyway? Or if you've been lucky enough to see a show at the Second City or I.O. Chicago or somewhere else, improv comedy, wonderful, I love it. Unfortunate side effect is that people sometimes know improv only as comedy. and to the point where improv and stand-up often get equated. But they're very different things, both great things that I love. But stand-up is really, it's the delivery of written material that people usually write by themselves to try to get people to laugh. And improvisational theater, it's co-created. And the real main thrust of it is to present a story to your audience. And it may be a funny story, but you know, if you go to Austin, Texas, or Chicago, or elsewhere, you might see an improvised Chekhov play, or Tennessee Williams style, or Jane Austen, like lots of different genres in theater. And then we have a lot of improv that's done in the context of drama therapy, or business training, or all other kinds of applications, because it really is a technology. I think of it as a kind of a technology for human connection and communication. So we're gonna warm up and play some improv games, then we'll dive into the material. So I'd like to know, when I say that, when I say we're going to play some improv games, who feels a little bit nervous about that idea? You've got reaction buttons down on the bottom right. You can give me a yes or a no with your reaction button, or you could give a big bold me in the chat like Heather did. So I see a thumbs up, Steve feels. I see John saying no. Steve is saying, be still my heart. Alana's like, oh my gosh, we're going to do improv. Allison feels nervous. Yeah, very understandable, right? Because we think of improv as comedy, and then we think, holy cow, somebody's going to make me get up in front of an audience and perform, and I have no idea what I'm going to say or do. Nerve-wracking for most people, even for me, if I go back to the beginning. Kathy says, no, I like it, which may be personality-based or experience-based or both. So I'd like to share a little bit first about kind of what we're really here to do. So I'm going to quickly share a slide with you from my presentation. And let me move this window so it doesn't block you. Come on now. Why doesn't it want to? Let's try that again. Okay, so improv, I said it's theater that's made up on the spot. And the one thing I want to reassure you about today, as we play some games, is that I am not here to get you to perform or entertain anybody, or to worry about being funny or creative or clever, which I'm sure everybody here is those things in the right context with the right people. Rather, we're really here to work on some core skills. The first one being listening. That's the foundation of all good improv, that we learn as improvisers to listen very carefully to each other, to be present, to read body language and emotion and tone. So listening becomes more than just hearing the surface level of words, but really perceiving kind of what's being offered by our scene partners on a deeper level. The other thing we're going to work on is the skill of accepting. So the example I always use in improv is that, let's say, you know, John and I were going to start a scene. John might say, hey, would you like a glass of milk? And he's pretending to hold a glass of milk. Accepting means that I accept that that is real. That John just said there's a glass of milk in his hand. That's real now. It doesn't mean that I have to drink the milk or like the milk or do anything that's expected with the milk. I just have to accept the idea that it's there. And this becomes really interesting to think about in teaching and learning environments and other environments where we're collaborating with people. What does it mean to accept the reality that somebody else is presenting, even if ours is different? Even if I have a different idea, different information, different emotion, whatever that is, how can I accept that's the reality they're living in, right? I'm going to put that glass of milk down. The next skill we'll work on is the idea of supporting. So John says, hey, would you like a glass of milk? I can support that offer in a scene by adding more information. I could say, yes, I love milk. It's my favorite drink. Now John knows my character loves milk. I could say, oh, no, thank you. I'm lactose intolerant. That would make me terribly sick. And John now knows that my character doesn't like milk products. And if we're doing a comedy scene, maybe he continues to offer me dairy-based products that I have to reject or something like that, right? But the idea of support is that I add something to the scene because we start with this blank stage and we got to fill it in piece by piece until we have a who, a what, and a where for our audience to latch onto a story. So this dynamic, if you've heard of yes and in improv, our camp is called Camp Yes And, is really about accepting and supporting. And this becomes an incredibly powerful dynamic in a teaching and learning environment. Again, of figuring out how can I accept the reality somebody else is living in and then support that. It's a different way to think about behavior, problem behavior perhaps, or that kind of thing, to think of it as an offer of the reality somebody's living in. Like, oh, that student's feeling very angry right now. I have to accept that. Now, how can I support that? Not that I want them to continue being angry, but how do I support them in processing those feelings, in regulating, and managing their behavior, that kind of thing. Last two skills that we'll work on today are taking risks and letting go of mistakes. So the kind of risks that I might ask you to take in this presentation are pretending to hold a glass of milk and drink it, or maybe I don't know, pretending to be somebody. We'll play a game, for example, where we're going to give each other made up gifts, and you're going to pretend to be somebody that thinks that's a great gift. So, minimal risks. Nobody's going to get humiliated. Nobody's going to jump off of a table or do anything dangerous, but small risks that I'll ask you to take. And along with that, then we have to be willing to let go of mistakes. There's no mistake that you can make during these 90 minutes that's going to break improv or keep anybody else from having a good time. If we get it wrong, that's okay. In fact, in improv, very often the mistakes are a lot more fun than if we got it right in the first place. So I'm going to stop sharing for the moment and just kind of ask, so far, any questions? Feel free to unmute, put your camera on, put it in the chat. Does this sound like something you're willing to try out with me? Does this put at ease some of those fears and worries about the idea of playing improv games? You can give me a yes, a no, a sure. Great, perfect. A little less afraid, yeah. And that's valid, Heather, because now I have to prove it, right? I said all these nice things, but now I have to demonstrate. It's the same thing we see in camp, right? We start camp, kids and adults, they want to be there, but they feel nervous. And we have to show them that this really is an environment where you can take risks and where it's okay to make mistakes. So that's my job. I'll tell one quick story and then we'll get going. I did a workshop once for Riley Children's Hospital. And afterwards, a woman who's a psychologist said to me, can I share with you that I was not looking forward to this workshop at all? And her friend said, can I share with you that she actually said that she would rather have dental work done than go to this workshop? But she enjoyed it. And now we've run a pilot program together of using improv techniques to work with kids who are experiencing anxiety. And she's a great partner, friend, and colleague. So I like to offer that as just that I think there's something in this improv that helps people who are feeling worried and nervous to not feel so worried and nervous. Jennifer, totally valid. You don't like to do anything with speaking in front of people, so still nervous. Obviously, anybody here, try what you want to try. And the only thing I ever ask in a workshop is if you sit out an activity, then try not to recruit people to the rebellion. So we're going to play a game. Here's how it goes. Everybody's got their camera off. John and Steve's, you can turn your cameras off and participate in this game as much as you want to. The secret is you can keep your camera off the whole time. So I'm letting you in on how you can participate or make it look like you're participating, but still stay in your comfort zone. So I'm going to start a game called Anybody Who. And I'm going to say anybody who, and I'm going to finish that statement with something that's true of myself. If that's true of you, turn on your camera. You also, we'll talk about variations in a minute. So anybody who enjoys traveling. If you enjoy traveling, turn on your camera. Excellent. Great. We've got lots of people who enjoy traveling, some people who don't, or some people who still maybe aren't feeling sure about whether they want to do this whole camera thing or not. And that's totally fine. Okay, camera's back off. I'll do another one. Anybody who has pizza as their favorite food? Oh, only the few and the proud of us, just the 6 of us. Great. People, cameras off. Good point, Craig. Anybody who, people who don't have cameras. So if you don't have a camera, you could do a thumbs up reaction. You could type like a me in the chat or that sort of thing if you'd still like to participate in the game. So I'll do one more. Anybody who speaks more than just the curse words in a language other than English? Awesome. We have a few. Great. If you would stay on camera, I'd like to ask somebody who's up on camera now to volunteer. Give me an everybody who that's true about you, and we'll see who else that is true about. So would you give me a hand if you're willing to throw out an anybody who? And there's no right or wrong to it. It's about you. It doesn't have to be anything wild or that sort of thing. Who's willing to do I'm waiting for hands. John, great. We're all going to turn off our cameras, and John's going to give us an everybody who. Anybody who.
Okay. Anybody who likes literature.
Fantastic. Excellent. Anybody who's on camera right now, if you'd be willing, unmute, give us an anybody who. Kathy, great, thank you. Everybody else can turn off.
Anybody who has grandchildren.
Ooh, anybody who has grandchildren. Awesome. Let's give Kathy a big round of applause. Oh, Trisha. Okay, Kathy and Trisha. Fantastic. Sometimes I'll play this game where I will challenge the group to try to find something where you think you're the only one who's had that experience or likes that thing. And sometimes I'll challenge the group to try to find one where you think everybody will, right? So it could be, you know, anybody who's alive. And of course, everybody would turn their camera on, hopefully. Great. Thank you, Kathy. Or was that Kathy? Yeah, that was Kathy. Great. Let's do a couple more. Anybody who enjoys the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Okay, we've got some of those people. Great. Anybody who's up on camera now, would you unmute and give me an anybody who?
Anybody who has a caffeine addiction.
Anybody who has a caffeine addiction? Great. Keep your camera on if that's you, and turn it on if you didn't have it on before and that's you. Excellent. Let's try to do a couple more. Somebody unmute, throw one out there. We will respond.
Anybody who plays video games.
Do Jackbox games count, Olivia?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stay on then. That's been my big pandemic video game experience. Cool. Any of you video gamers, somebody unmute and give us another anybody who.
Anybody who likes African culture.
Anybody who likes African culture. Great. Y'all are making this game really easy for me. I just keep my camera on the whole time. I'm a coffee drinking, video game playing African culture fan. Let's do one more. Anybody who's up, go ahead and unmute and give us something.
Anybody that has pets.
Anybody that has pets? I'm gonna have to turn off. Excellent. All right. Everybody who's willing, turn on your camera and give a sign language round of applause to each other. This is more pleasant on Zoom than actual applause. So for people who have no experience with improv, you just did some improv. So feel free to unmute. Stay on camera if you're comfortable, and you can turn it off if you're not. And you can unmute or you can say in the chat, what does that game have to do with improv? How is that improv? Why would improvisers play a game like that?
Learning about the other people's characters.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, sometimes in a show, if I want to play a character, I think about a friend of mine or an experience I had or a relative, and I kind of draw that inspiration for a character. Absolutely. Making up a question on the spot, Jordan says. Yeah, right? So we're having to be spontaneous, throwing out an offer, right? If we think about the skills of accepting and supporting, I didn't hear anybody challenge anybody else of you don't like pizza or that sort of thing, right? It gets us to exercise that muscle of accepting that idea, and then we support it by putting the camera on or keeping it off. Yeah, it builds community.
Can I say, Jim, I really like the idea that this is a community building exercise and a comfort building exercise. And suddenly there's more people who have their cameras on who are willing to, engage at that level.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. I mean, when we first started, only a few of us had our cameras on, me and Steve and John and you. And now there's more people who have their cameras on. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. And, at camp, we see it a lot that we'll often open with this game. If we're live, we'll do it as everybody come over here. So you like walk to an open space in the room and say, come over here if you like pizza. And people could come, really close to me if they love pizza, or part way if they kind of like it, or move farther away if they hate pizza, whatever. And that's a fun aspect of the game too, is like we don't all have to like the same things or have the same experiences to be part of this community that can accept and support each other's ideas. And that really connects to the topic we're going to be talking about quite a bit of, what is it like to be in a diverse community where we have differences, but we still stay connected to each other. So we see it a lot at camp that we'll open with a game like this, and then when we take a break for snack time, kids are approaching each other and saying, oh, I like that anime too, or Pokemon, or, whatever it is that they're into, or particular video games. Right away we see in our camp that as we start to sort of peel back the layers of what communication and social interaction are, like we don't often really teach those things. We expect people to absorb it, which is highly problematic in a diverse society, right? Because the more powerful narrative kind of takes over as to what that is, what's acceptable by default. So as we peel back those layers and we give people stuff to make conversation out of, it happens. It's not like there's an inability. It's different when we teach how to do it and we provide the raw materials. Last thing I'll say about this game is that I said improv is theater that's made up on the spot. And this is what we make it up out of, our life experience. So while I have years of experience as a performer, I can't weigh my life experience against yours. You have just as rich of a life experience as I do. So you have all the raw material it takes to be an improviser, just as much as I do. If you fall in love with it like I did, you'll want to do some practice so you can let those ideas flow and not like criticize yourself before your idea even comes out. But the stuff is there. So that's something to hopefully not worry about so much. We're gonna do.
Oh, hey, Jim, there's a question, I think. Yeah. I think Veronica maybe has a question.
Yeah, go for it, Veronica.
Okay, I just wanted to say that if I don't turn on my video, don't worry, because I'm struggling with sound. So I have to put the phone on my ears so that I can hear well.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the explanation. Yeah, and that's kind of a feature of our camp too. It's like there's no forced participation, and recognizing that there are all kinds of reasons for why people participate as they do. So, Veronica, you're not able to turn on your camera, but you contributed a question to the group, So all kinds of ways to contribute and participate. And we definitely accept all of that. So I want to play a game that I find helps to kind of ground us in this weird Zoom space. So Cheryl, I love that you're on the movie screen. I think that's fantastic. I would invite anybody who is comfortable to turn on your camera, and we're going to play a simple mirroring game. So in a moment, I'm going to start to move within this little weird rectangle that we all live in right now. And when I say go, I'm going to ask you to try to mirror my movements as best as you can. And that's it. That's the object of the game. Again, you know, it's a small risk I'm asking you to take. If you make a mistake, guess what? It doesn't matter. It's not going to ruin the game. It's not going to stop anybody else from being able to play or anything like that. So I am the leader. I am moving my body. Go. Just mirror as best you can. Very nice. All right, in a moment, I'm going to ask somebody else to take on the leadership. And you can just move however you want to. There's no right or wrong to it. In fact, a repeating pattern is very helpful to your follower. So if that's what you want to do, that's fine. And if you totally don't want to do it, you can kind of give me, you know, a sign or turn your camera off. So Allison Price, would you be the leader for a moment? We're just going to follow Allison the best we can. Great. I'm going to turn it over to Misty. Misty, would you be our leader for a moment? Yeah, I love that. Remind me to talk about what you just did. That was perfect. Excellent. Olivia, would you be our leader? Good. Lexiana, would you be our leader? Nice. Veronica, would you be our leader? Yeah, love that big smile. You
Okay,
can just,
I'll try.
yeah, just move however you want to. There's no right or wrong
Okay,
to
let's go.
it. Let's go. Let's see. Alana, would you be our leader? Alana Tucky.
This is really hard on a phone. I have to let you know, because it keeps falling on me. Oh
Oh,
my gosh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Little John Travolta.
Enough.
I love when the person doesn't know what to do and they come out with the most active.
I don't even know John Travolta. I'm gonna think. Oh, look at Vogue. There we go.
Very nice. Excellent. Asia, were you our leader yet? Would you be our leader? And you can just move. Yeah, great. There you go. Excellent. Excellent. I'm going to throw it to Darren. Ooh, it's like a magic trick. All right, and you can let that movement go and give yourselves a round of applause. Very nice job, everybody. So again, what does that game have to do with improv? Given kind of how I talked about those core skills, why would we want to practice something like that, mirroring movement?
Is it maybe that sometimes listening isn't just listening?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So if you think about, yeah, I'll get to these in the chat in a second. If you think about listening on a deeper level, right? Mirroring the physicality shows that I'm paying attention, right? Absolutely. And it's also a good example of how the mistakes kind of don't matter. Because if we think about cultivating that skill of presence and deep listening as a goal of this workshop, then whether I was out of sync, you know, when Olivia was my leader or not, I was invested and engaged, like somebody said engagement up there, maybe it was Jordan. I was engaged. I was working on that skill. And so that's something I always like to kind of remind my teachers about. When you're trying an improv game, don't get lost in the rules of the game. Remember the purpose. That the purpose in this kind of game is focus, attention, presence, deep listening, accepting and supporting, right? So even if it takes me 30 seconds to process the move John's doing and then I mirror it, I'm still accepting and supporting. It might take me a little more time, but I'm doing that. I'm working on that skill. And I feel like sometimes in education, we get so lost in the steps of an activity that we kind of can forget the purpose. So if you do an improv activity, if you want to try one out and it falls apart, it's actually good. What you're learning is what your students need, right? So if I'm doing this activity and I'm the leader and I see that people are like not following me, what do they need? Maybe they need me to slow down. Maybe they need my movements to make more sense, to have more of a pattern, more symmetry, right? If I can kind of put aside my own self-criticism and look at what they're showing me, then I can respond to that. And so when we think about models of special education, like response to instruction is kind of one of the big ones, right? This idea that we're supposed to be paying attention to our students and then responding to their needs and giving them that support. These improv games can build a foundation of that for you. I want to look at some of the other things that were said in the chat. Shows that we're engaged. Practice following and thinking quickly. Yeah, the thinking quickly is an interesting one for me. Often when I ask people, like, you know, what do you think the skills that an improviser has to have are? I'll get that idea of thinking quickly. And I'm 52 years old. I bet most people in this room think more quickly than I do, honestly. But I think what I do have practice in as an improviser is, again, not blocking my own ideas, of not criticizing myself and saying, nobody's going to want to hear that. That's a dumb idea. That's not original, et cetera, and just letting it out, for better or worse, just letting it come out. And therefore, I think as an educator, I'm able to better structure an environment where my students feel free to let their ideas come out and their experience come out. And I think as we shift more and more into thinking about disability and supporting students and people with disabilities, that's one of the big keys, is how can we create an environment where diversity of experience is voiced or embodied. Helps to build skills. Yep, letting go of mistakes. If you mess up, just keep going. Exactly, Jennifer, that's a great point. Spontaneity again, the leader's making up stuff and everybody else has to go along with it. Adding something to the big picture gives you something to focus on, makes you forget to worry about the others. Yes, it's a great point. I listened to a podcast in the past year where I think it was Brene Brown or somebody like that was talking about this idea that our brains are the things that can be anxious about the future or regretful about the past, but our bodies are always right here in the present. And so advice to improvisers or public speakers or teachers is, if you lose the thread, get back into your body, do something, right? It might be reorganizing your note cards if you're giving a talk, or taking a drink of water, whatever it is, get your body moving. It gives your audience a chance to process. That, you know, like a minute on stage feels like forever, but to the audience, it's not a ton of time. And when you get back into your body and get it moving again, it does free up your mind, like Allison was saying in that comment. Great for bonding, taking focus from ourselves to what was going on. Yes. And Misty, that's a great point. That's really the true skill of an improviser, I find, is starting to develop an eye for what my partners need from me or what the story needs from me. Not so much like feeling pressure to come up with this great idea, but what am I needed for? Let's see, 3 more messages. Going to try that with your littles at work on Monday. Awesome, Trish. Let me know how it goes. And great. Okay. Boy, this time is going to fly by. So let me get into a little bit of the topic at hand. So there was a call for proposals from Indiana Humanities to celebrate the 200-year anniversary of the publication of Frankenstein, one of our most powerful early works of science fiction. And right away, I started thinking about it, you know, given my work in terms of how we think about disability. And so I started to kind of look into this topic, and I'll share just a couple of things I found. So, you know, it's kind of acknowledged that disability in early literary texts like Shelley's Frankenstein is often equated with this idea of monstrosity, whether it's physical or cultural. So it's knowing that Frankenstein is even more remarkable in the way it challenges this sort of very commonplace framework for viewing people with disabilities in this very harsh way. And you can see it in the text. The first time Victor sees his creation, he says, "Oh, no mortal could support the horror of that countenance. A mummy, again endued with animation, could not be so hideous as that wretch." He calls it ugly, he calls him a thing, etc. And when the creature spoke, Victor says, you know, his words had a strange effect on me. I compassioned him. I felt for him and wanted to console him. But then when I looked upon him again, the filthy mass that moved and talked, you know, made my heart sick, etc. So that this inability of Victor to be able to accept the differences in this person's visual features. And as I said, you know, it makes Frankenstein a really remarkable book for its time, and I think it's why it's endured, that Shelley goes to great lengths to show that the real problem is not what or who Victor Frankenstein made, but how he reacted to it, that really created the issue. And the creature, as the narrator kind of talks about this, or the creation, let's say. Once I falsely hoped to meet the beings who, pardoning my outward form, would love me for the excellent qualities which I was capable of unfolding. So, you know, the creation himself recognizes that people are unable often to kind of dig beneath the surface, which kind of led me to this sort of social definition of disability. So in the world of disability studies, disability doesn't really focus on the body, but really on the social. It's not something a person possesses, but something a person encounters when dealing with other people or physical spaces that are inaccessible. So in some ways, we create disability in the way we respond to the diversity of human experience and perception, physicality, emotion, etc. And an example I often like to use of that is, you know, you've got this building here, right, where we've got tons of steps, and they put in a railing after the fact, thinking maybe that would help some people, versus this building, Target, where very often you'll find that it's either level with a parking lot or built with a ramp built right into it, etc. So obviously, in one scenario, we're creating disability to a larger degree than in the other, just through the design of a building. Let me stop sharing there and look. Great, thank you. A couple people have said that's a powerful point. Talk to me about that. What does that bring up for you? What are you thinking?
Can I make a comment? Okay, so what I find interesting about what your comment is people, when we think about disability, people who have different abilities don't think of themselves in the same way that society views them. And I think that's one of the biggest, most powerful things for me is people are who are struggling. It's not struggling with really what they have to do. It's how they interact with society and the outside world.
Great point. Thank you, Steve. Veronica, want to talk a little bit about what you were
Okay, I
saying?
want to say that the big part is it depends with how you're gonna take it, starting with you as a person. Then the way you take it now, it will pass across to the people who are surrounding you. And the way those people think about you, take you, view you, anything you say, it matters because it will have an impact on you and you too, how you present yourself to others matters a lot. That's what I can say.
Yeah, I agree with you. So the disability really becomes this kind of dynamic between people and among communities. It's not that it's not real that say somebody uses a wheelchair. I mean that's real. I'm not saying we're creating that. But again, if we think about the way we design our spaces, the degree to which that is disabling is something we create as communities and societies. And so it's just something that we need to really keep in mind, especially again, for me working with educators, that we have a lot of control over creating the conditions for student success or failure. Can't control everything, but we have a lot of control. Yeah, Lauren says it's hard for us to focus on what's underneath the surface, right? And if we have an environment where, again, like people don't feel free to express that, it's even harder, even if we want to get beneath the surface. If we don't create the conditions where people feel like they can, it gets even tougher. And, if we had more time, if we had a day together, I guarantee most people, unless there's technology involved or special circumstances, would feel comfortable coming on camera and speaking. And it's not because of me. It's because of these practices that put people on equal footing, listening to each other, accepting and supporting each other's ideas, encouraging risk-taking, letting go of mistakes. Those are just powerful practices in a learning environment. So many great comments. I'm going to take a moment. Yeah, I agree. These are some fab people. Jennifer says, it reminds me of a time after I had a surgery, I had to use a power chair at the store because I literally had a 16, yeah, you had an incision. Absolutely, right? And so if you go to Target, whether it's a temporary thing, a permanent thing or whatever, you're able to get in the door. If you go to that other building with all those stairs, not going to help you, even with that railing that they put in afterwards. Let's see. Cheryl, would you talk to me a little bit about heteroglossia?
Okay, so Bakhtin is a theorist, and he says that I, as a person, hear what you are saying based on everything that I have learned up in my point in life today. And what you are saying to me is filtered through every person and everything that you have ever learned up to this point in time today. And so we have different upbringings. And so we hear things differently based on what we've been taught in our upbringing, our perceptions.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. So like it or not, we are constantly co-creating meaning, right? Even if I just try to be the best sponge I can be and absorb what Steve or John is saying to me, I'm still a co-creator in that process of making meaning because it has to filter through my experiences, cultural, social, familial, all those pieces. Absolutely. So it's a great example, and Diana taking credit for teaching. That's great. Nothing feels better than when your students are showing off how smart they are. Awesome. Okay. So I want to, oh boy, we're going to go so quickly through games. I want to play a quick game that's a yes and kind of game just to build this skill. Let's see, John, would you mind if I put you on the spot as a volunteer?
I'm on the spot.
Thank you, John. In a moment, John, I'm going to give you a pretend gift. And your job is to play a character that thinks that's the best gift in the world. So you're going to say thank you, and you're going to tell me why that's the perfect gift for your character. And for everybody else, when you get a chance to try this, I want to encourage you, it doesn't have to be a wild gift. It could be something very normal, mundane. You can use the look around the room trick, like there's a pair of glasses in front of me, so I could pretend to give John a pair of glasses or something like that. Any old idea is fine. And I'll talk about why not. So it gives my partner the opportunity to elevate that gift and to make it important and meaningful to their character. Versus giving him, a unicorn that flies through space and travels through time, and like there's not a lot of other places to go with that kind of idea, So here we go. John, I got you this shiny red apple.
Oh boy. I haven't had an apple in like a day. I was just thinking about an apple. Oh, and look at the red. Oh my, Jim. Thank you so much. I mean, if I ever thought of an apple, this is exactly what I would want. Thank you, Jim.
So glad.
Thank you.
You're welcome, John. You're welcome. Now, John, you can give me a pretend gift. Any old thing. You can use the look around the room trick or whatever comes to you.
Ooh, okay. Okay. Hey, Jim, I got you this 1818 copy of Frankenstein.
Oh, John, thank you so much. There's something about the smell of an old book, I think, because when I was a kid, I loved to go to the library. And that was the first time that somebody made me feel smart, when I was there in those books as a kid. And that smell just always brings that back to me. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, glad you like it.
So there you go. Well, the world will never know if John truly likes apples and I truly like old books or not. We played a character who does, right? So one thing about this game that's interesting is to think about our students, like the kids I work with at camp or whoever else. I'm never going to be able to make anybody express gratitude. That's your choice, right? When we talk about independent living, right, John? That's somebody's choice. You get to decide whether you express gratitude or not. But if I add the layer of character and theater, I can engage kids and adults in practicing how to express gratitude. And then you have the true choice. When you have the skill, you can decide when and how you want to use it. And that's true of all the skills we're teaching our students. We're never going to be able to force them to apply those skills, but we can help them practice it so that they truly have that choice.
Well, Jim, I'd say this is from the director spot. Yeah, it is what we give people and what they see. And, for a lot of people with disabilities, if they see people always judging them, a lot of people do retreat. If we see acceptance, then we see blossoming. And if we see acceptance of yourself, I mean, the things that can happen way outstrip anything that you think could happen. So we see that as peers, when we have peers teaching people with disabilities about their experience or talking about reactions to things, how powerful what it is that we allow people to give themselves. So I think that's the kind of the lesson there is, what are you giving yourself? Are you giving it this, or are you giving it this? And why are we giving those things?
Yeah, absolutely. Lauren, I'll get to your question in a second. That's a great question. Yeah. Motivation is often regarded as this thing that sort of comes before action. But motivation really is a response to success, right? If I do something and I'm successful, I'd probably be more inclined to do it again. If I do something and I'm unsuccessful, I probably won't want to do it again, or maybe not right away, that kind of thing. And so, John and I just played a game, and when he gave me that book, I said, well, that's a terrible idea. Well, John's probably not going to be motivated to play that game with me again, right?
I just give you the 1830 copy and then see if you like that better.
Persistence. I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. Lauren asked, can you use props in improv? Absolutely. It's it's not going to break improv. Very often when you see props used in improv, it's a like, how many different things can I turn this phone into? It's a phone, it's a cookie, it's a necktie. You know, it's that scene from the movie Airplane, if you remember that. It's a brooch, it's a pterodactyl, right? Absolutely, you can use props. The one of the cool things about improv is we don't need anything. So like when I've worked with speech therapists, let's say in a school, who more times than I like have to do speech therapy in something that used to be a closet, right? So we're not going to have props, we're not going to have scenery or anything like that. We don't need it with improv, but sure, you can bring it in. You can have lots of fun with costumes and props and scenery if you want to. There's a whole improv show on Broadway where they would do improv shows in the sets of other theater shows that were dark on Monday nights. So they would go in and use the existing set to improvise a completely different show. Super fun. Yeah, absolutely, Lauren, no problem. Okay, so I'm going to invite people to play this game a little bit of giving gifts. Anybody who's willing to, turn on your camera. That lets us know that you're game to play. And again, the simple thing is I'm going to give a gift to somebody. They're going to play a character that thinks that's the perfect gift for them, and they're going to tell me why. And then you're going to get to give a gift to somebody else who has their camera on. So, Kathy, I got you this hand-sharpened pencil. You unmute yourself, Kathy.
How did you know that I always choose to write with a pencil? The pencil is a very important tool for me. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Great. Kathy, you can give a gift to somebody else. No problem, Trish.
Cheryl, I got you a really nice gift. I got you this set of Cliff Notes for all of William Shakespeare's plays.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. You know, you probably didn't know this, but I've never read Shakespeare before, and it's something I've been thinking a lot about lately. And so the Cliff Notes version will help me probably to become a lot more interested in reading the actual books and plays. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Cheryl, would you give a gift to somebody else?
Okay, sure.
With their camera on.
All right, hold on.
Sure. It could be Olivia, Lexiana, Steve.
Okay, Olivia, I am going to give you a bag of handmade soap.
Wow, I've been looking for this type of soap everywhere. Lavender, how did you know? That is my favorite scent of soap. It's so relaxing. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Olivia, would you give a gift to either Lexiana or Steve?
Lexiana, I'm going to give you these 24-karat diamond earrings.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding? These are gorgeous. I've never received a gift like this. Thank you so much.
Great. And Lexiana, you give one to Steve?
Steve, I'd like you to have this brand new kitchen set that I just found, and I don't need it anymore, so I figured I'd give it to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I don't know if you know this about me, but I am here. Hold on, let me take them. Thank you. I am a big believer in reuse and recycling, and so I love regifting and sharing old equipment and materials that I have, and I love receiving that kind of thing too. So thank you. That is really, really nice of you.
Excellent. Steve, you want to close out the circle? Alana, do you want a gift? Do you want Steve to give you a gift?
Yes. So it just so happens that over
It'd be
here,
nice for a change to get a gift from him.
well, I don't know what you're talking about. Over here, I have this genuine 1849 miner's helmet, complete with a gas lamp on the top of it.
Wow. I really don't know what to say. I'm taking it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good.
I'm also in the kitchen right this sec. I will be able to use this as I take the dogs out in the middle of the night when you don't. That'll be perfect. That'll be great.
and Alana, you can close the circle by giving me a gift if you don't mind.
Oh, well, since I love my husband so much, we went to Scotland and we have extra bottles of scotch sitting around. So how would I give you one of my husband's bottles of scotch? Wouldn't that be great? A nice big single malt bottle.
Oh, thank you so much. I have
Welcome.
all these jars with labels on them that like the sticky stuff won't come off. So I'm just going to use this scotch to clean the sticky labels off the jars. I think that'll work really well. All right, everybody, give yourselves a round of applause. You played another improv game.
Oh,
Okay, so we witnessed a couple things there. You could see, so there were the rules of the game. Very simple. Give a gift, say thank you, say, well, it was great, right? But Steve and Alana, because they know each other very well, created a game within the game, right? And we could start to see what that was, which was poking a little bit of fun at each other of husband and wife stuff, right? And then I continued that game thinking Steve would probably be horrified if I used his scotch to clean the labels off of jars, right? The fun thing about that is it tells us a couple of things. One, in any show, there's like the plot line, the characters, the setting, all that stuff. That's the story. And underneath that is the relationships between the people who are performing that show. And when both of those things are going really well, it's a good story and the people are really into performing it, that's a great show. And I call it the Carol Burnett principle that tells us that the bottom layer is actually the most important. Carol Burnett was a television variety show in the 1970s. They did sketch comedy and stuff like that. And every week, one of the sketches would completely fall apart, crumble. They might not even get through the whole thing because the people would start to make each other laugh and break character. The audience loved it. In fact, that's why they started to tune in week after week. So on the story level, things were dysfunctional, but on the people level, things were really working well. And so that's a point I always like to bring back to my teachers and my students, of thinking about the classroom the same way, right? I can have the greatest lesson in the world planned, but if we have a dysfunctional, fear-based, restrictive, antagonistic classroom environment, that lesson plan is not going to fly. And by the same token, my lesson plan could fall apart. Maybe I'm taking a risk of implementing some new curriculum or a new technology tool or that kind of thing. If my students and I are good together, we're a learning community, we're going to figure it out and it's going to be okay. So when we talk about academic and social emotional learning as if they're these two separate things, they're not. They're always happening at the same time. And it's whether we choose to be intentional about the bottom layer or not. And my argument with improv is it kind of provides a foundation for being intentional about that bottom layer. That we get into a practice of listening to each other, accepting each other's ideas and supporting them with our own ideas and that sort of thing. So that even when we're doing academic works, like we could do that gift giving game based on science or history, and we could connect that to curriculum quite easily. So let's say we're only going to do the 1800s because that's when Frankenstein was written, and all the gifts have to be from that time period, right? So now we're doing history, but underneath it, we're still doing yes and listening and all those good things. So we're reinforcing that social emotional learning compact. And so that's how I think these techniques can be a really powerful piece of building an inclusive learning community.
Tim, can I just jump in and say,
Please.
I think this is a terrific idea, and it's a terrific way of thinking about the way communities structure themselves and the way communities that are particularly efficient at growing and becoming more knowledgeable do their work. And this, by the way, is exactly what scientists do. This idea of building knowledge and constructing knowledge and building off of the ideas of other people. And there's formal components to this, like how we cite sources and things like that. But this is at its heart exactly what the scientific community does, the yes and approach of kind of knowledge construction. So this is terrific.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've been asked before, particularly in business training contexts, like when I talk about mistakes, like, well, who wants to make mistakes, blah, blah, blah. And it's not that scientists want to make mistakes, but scientists value mistakes or unexpected outcomes, right? Which is really what a mistake is. Um, and in improv, we kind of learn to like steer into the skid, we call it. Like one of the improv sayings is, if this is true, what else is true? Right? Which you can think of as a really scientific way of thinking too. Like, so I discovered this thing. If that's true, what else might be true? We're generating hypotheses, right? So even if that thing I discovered was unexpected or the result of an accident, there could be gold there that we follow and learn about. Trisha, great. I love that you're interested in my camp. Email me or visit the website or that sort of thing, and I can tell you more about it. Okay, so I'm going to take you a little bit more on the journey of kind of investigating like how, starting with how disability was sort of viewed in the time of the writing of Frankenstein to a more modern kind of take. So we find that over time, people start to really shift the way they read this book to the point where the creature, like it doesn't even feel good to call him a creature for me. Like, so probably many people who read Frankenstein in the time it was first created would not have viewed the creature as sort of the hero of the book, but it starts to shift over time. So here's an educator who says, my class loved the book and responded well to it. They overwhelmingly aligned themselves with the creature. And in fact, at one point, several of them asked me to stop calling the creature the monster. They claimed that he was not a monster, and calling it a monster, they said, was the whole problem. So it's an interesting shift. And we've definitely seen different treatment of disabilities in popular culture in 200 years, which is wonderful. I'm glad that we've changed, that we're no longer presenting people with disabilities as monsters. But we still have some ways to go. So I found some interesting writing about the film Wonder, which, I'm going to say the film brought tears to my eyes. I read the book to my kids when they were younger. It's a beautiful book and a beautiful film. But it also falls into kind of a trap of sentimentality. That this author, Ariel Henley, is a woman who has a similar condition to the protagonist in the book, which if you haven't read the book, it's about a young boy who's born with some facial differences, that make it really difficult for him to succeed in school because of the ways that people view him when they see him and that sort of thing. And so Ariel says, it's one thing to read about severe disfigurement and the social trauma that can accompany it in a book, and another entirely to see it play out on screen. So this visual piece again comes in. The prosthetics in the film make the character of Augie difficult to look at, but not too difficult, this author felt, which allows the viewers to be a little more receptive to the film's message of accepting those who look different, though not too different. So at least for this author, who's a person with a disability, she really felt that, again, we've made some progress in how we present people with disabilities in popular media. But there's still this kind of sentimentality piece, or like keeping it sort of not too far out of the box in terms of social norms, which is it had some really interesting connections for me to some research in the world of autism, where they found that they had what they called typically developing observers do two different things. One group read the transcripts of things that people with autism said, and one people watched video of the people with autism saying those things. And they found that the typically developing observers who watched video had far less favorable first impressions of people with autism and fewer intentions to pursue social interactions. So they said, would you hang out with this person, et cetera. So the visual still seems to be a hang up for a lot of people. They found that those negative first impressions occurred only when audio or visual information was present and not when the transcript of their speech content was evaluated. So going back to this idea of disability sort of being created between people, it suggests this idea that we still have work to do as society, as communities, on how we interpret what we see and hear from people. That if we read their words, we don't have much of an issue with it. But if we watch them and hear them say it, somehow that changes. And that's something that's happening in between myself and this other person. So yes, at our camp, do we work on supporting our students to communicate and to interact socially more effectively? Absolutely. But the other piece, why we have teachers and students come together, is so that teachers learn their role in creating an environment that shapes that dynamic. And probably it still brings tears to my eyes. One of the most powerful things I ever read from a teacher after coming to our camp was, several times this week, I found myself wishing that I was more like them. And that, to me, is the transformation in the educational environment that I want to see. Yeah, so I see Misty saying it's sad. Kathy saying it reminds me of the Elephant Man. Yeah, there is a lot of sadness to it. There's also, I think there are lots of reasons why we have to work hard to broaden the way we think when we see and hear people who are different than we are. I think there are a lot of reasons for needing to do that work. We need to do the work. Does camp have a high success rate with communication? Absolutely. I mean, I've had kids like tell me, a kid told me I was doing my senior presentation and the technology failed. And I didn't freak out. I kept going with my presentation. This one will make me cry. I went to a retirement celebration for a colleague of mine. And I hadn't remembered. It was like, 5 years earlier, his grandson had come to camp. His grandson gets up and starts giving a speech for his grandfather at his retirement celebration and says, most of it is about grandpa and how grandpa used to drive him to school and talk to him and how much he loved that and got out of that. But the kid said, I would not be up here giving that speech for you if you had not told me about camp and had me go to camp. And I don't care about the research. When a kid is able to get up and speak for his grandfather at his retirement, that's all the data I need. I do care about the research, but that's the kind of data that means a lot to me. So
Jim,
favorite memories. There we go.
this is John. Just what I found is just my friend base has always been kind of wide and very varied, and even when I've been working, the thing too is that I find that just discounting wisdom from anywhere is a mistake. And that mistake comes from your lack of understanding usually. So, I mean, I've had people where it is extremely difficult to have a conversation with them because of physical disabilities. And, just over the years, this condition's worsening in that. But some of the smartest things I've ever heard have come from deep listening to what that person is saying, because their experience is so informed. And I think frequently when I've interacted with some people, nobody listens to what they're saying, but they have these fantastic, the people that I'm talking about, particularly some individuals, you talk with them and these just nuggets of observation come out. And that's due to, like we've been talking in these improv exercises, just how they've taken information in, how they've co-created or been co-recreated around them, and then their perception, right? And so the value of understanding other people's perspectives and really measuring those I always are finding valuable, because so many wise things come out. I have no
Yeah.
clue, because my whole perception is someone that's not had that issue, or not
Yeah.
seen it from a walking perspective and a good interaction perspective. So I always find that what you're saying incredibly valuable, because it's not just communication, like you like to say, is a co-creation, right? And so I think often people come down into a conversation, they say, I'm going to talk to that person and say what I want to say, and then I'm done, because I don't even need to know what they're talking about, right? But when you create a space, I've found so much powerful information comes from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, for me, it comes back to that idea of acceptance, support, or yes, and it's not always easy, I'll say, especially, in a teaching environment where you have a lot of variables that you're trying to manage and all, but to do my best to think like, how can I accept what this person is saying to me as something they experience as truth? How could that be true for that person? Even if I end up disagreeing, there's still something to be gained from it, something I can learn about, and then I can think about how to support it. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so time slips by. I wish we had a lot more, but I'm going to just kind of get to the main, or the final kind of point in game. So, as I started to look into how stories of disability have kind of changed over time since Frankenstein to now, I find that more and more people with disabilities are guiding us and telling us what the new stories need to be. And one thing that really came to mind for me was a campaign that a friend of mine was involved with, this I Am Not Your Inspiration campaign. So in the center is my friend Katrina Kelly. Hers is I'm Not Your Inspiration, I'm Your Coworker. And her point being, she always says, you can be inspired by me because I graduated at the top of my class in law school, and I'm a mom and a working lawyer, and those kinds of things. Don't be inspired by me simply because I'm in a wheelchair. And so it's interesting to think of how, Frankenstein in the early 1800s maybe was seen as a villain or a monster, to becoming a hero, but maybe there's some sentimentality or even pity that was involved in that heroism, to now where we're being challenged to create new stories where people with disabilities may be heroic, but not simply because they're a person with a disability, because they would like to be heroic because of their words and their actions, the way anybody would be described as heroic or not. So I want to use a tool to kind of wrap up that we use in improv called the story spine to make up a story that features a person with a disability. And it's going to be different. The person with a disability is going to be the center of our story, but the story is not going to be about them having a disability. So we're going to give it a try. And I will guide you through using the story spine to create the story. So if you're willing to play this game with me, turn on your camera. And I promise you, I will give you nice, clear prompts that help you to create this story with me. The story spine is just a series of prompts. Once there was, every day, but one day, because of that, because of that, because of that, until finally, and ever since that day. It's kind of a concise arc of a story. We could tell the story of, let's say, Star Wars: A New Hope, right? Once there was a kid who dreamed of going into space, but every day he had to whine about the power converters until one day he found out that his dad was a space guy and his aunt and uncle were killed. And because of that, he had to flee the planet. And because of that, he met this pilot and a big shaggy guy. And because of that, they had space adventures until finally they overthrew the empire, right? Like, short version of Star Wars, but you could tell the story with that. So anybody else, feel free to throw on your camera. We're going to create a story together. So Trisha, once there was, Trisha, you disappeared on me. Let me know if you don't want to do this part of the game. But Trisha, once there was, who is our story about?
A 10-year-old boy.
A 10-year-old boy, and let's give that 10-year-old boy some kind of disability. What kind of disability might this 10-year-old boy have?
Cleft palate.
Cleft palate. Okay, once there was a 10-year-old boy with cleft palate, and let's see. Oh, Olivia, what did this little boy love?
This little boy loved to go to the zoo and just stare at the animals, because even though all of them looked different, they were all there and everybody loved them no matter how they look. So he's always loved
Wow.
animals.
Awesome. So once there was a 10-year-old boy with cleft palate who loved to go to the zoo every day and stare at animals. So that's our everyday life. Once there was an everyday, right? If we think about it, we have the seed of the whole story right there. Once there was a 10-year-old boy with cleft palate who loved going to the zoo. Every day he would go and look at the animals and love to see how everybody accepted their diversity. But one day is the next piece in the story spine. So one day, Kathy, something happens that gets in the way of that everyday activity of going to the zoo and looking at the animals. What is it? If you unmute yourself, Kathy.
But one day he woke up with a very bad cold and could not leave his house.
One day he woke up with a very bad cold and could not leave his house. And because of that, because he woke up with a bad cold, Heather, what happened? And couldn't leave his house.
His guardians found a virtual tour of the zoo.
His guardians found a virtual tour of the zoo and set it up. Because his guardians found a virtual tour of the zoo and set it up, Alana, what happened?
Let me think.
So we've got the kid, he loves to go to the zoo.
And so I think I got it. And it inspired him to start writing down his thoughts into a book.
It inspired him to start writing his thoughts down into a book. And because he was inspired to write his thoughts down into a book, Steve, what happened?
He started working with one of his friends who was very good at drawing and illustrating. And he drew all the animals that this boy was describing.
Excellent. He started to collaborate with a friend who is good at drawing and started drawing all the animals until finally, John, what happened?
Until finally, it turned out that both of the boys didn't know this, but the dad of the friend knew a publisher, and because they knew the publisher, they sent the book to the publisher, and it got published. And they were like 10 years old, and they got this book published because the words were so observant and the pictures were so well done.
Excellent. And we're going to go back to Tricia. Ever since that day, what was life like for our hero, the boy with the cleft palate?
The kids at school thought he was really cool, and he was able to afford the surgery he needed to fix his cleft.
Perfect. Great. Give yourselves a round of applause, right? We did it. We made up a story that has never been told before, featured a person with a disability who had some success, not just because they had a disability. I loved where we came up with some ideas of how the community contributed, right, by finding the virtual tour and all that sort of thing. So, obviously, the story spine is a really powerful tool, really easy to use, fun to use in different ways. Sometimes the stories, like, we might need to fill in some gaps or that kind of thing, because it's just kind of a bare outline. We could rewind it and play it out again. Like the but one day could be a completely different one, and then we see how that goes. Which, when you start getting into the idea of social stories, if you want to talk about like bullying or bystander behavior, things like that, we could play out many different scenarios of the but one day and how people responded to that. Like, so suppose in this story that the people didn't respond by finding the virtual zoo tour, and they responded in some other way. We could see how that affected the life of our hero, right? It's a technique people can use to tell stories about their own lives, to imagine future stories of like, like the once there was is right now. And let's think about the but one day, your 3-year or your 5-year plan or whatever that is. If we want to talk about maybe college and career, that kind of thing. It's a very versatile tool. So we did it. We created a new story of disability. That was the point we were here for. And I just will end with these points to ask the question about Frankenstein. Like, what would have happened if Victor had instead lived up to his responsibilities by choosing to nurture his creature? How different would the story have been if Victor Frankenstein and the villagers had reacted to the monster not with fear and violence, but with yes and got your back, which is the thing we say to each other before we go on stage for every improv show. Let's write that story instead. So there you have it. Kathy asks, we have a short time for Q&A. Was I supposed to leave more time for Q&A?
Oh, no, you're fine, man. Just however it turns out. Hey, in the true spirit of improv, turns out how it turns out.
Okay, great. And I don't have a hard stop, so if there are questions that take us past the next 2 minutes, I'm fine to hang out and talk a little bit. Thank you, Diana. Thank you. It was wonderful to work with everybody and meet everybody. Could this technique be used in a prison legacy program? I think so, Kathy. One of the things that I know about prison education is you're really limited on what you can bring in. And you just need to bring yourself in. So that's one thing about it. So thank you. Thank you for the great feedback. Are there any other questions I can answer for anybody?
Oh, Jim, I had one. Is there a place that story spine that you presented, is there a place that lives somewhere?
Yes. Let's see.
Because what I thought was, I remember about half of it.
Yes.
To speak to, I was going to say something to about the prison legacy. I did some parenting stuff in prisons. It's called like Proud Fathers, and basically what they did is tried to help people, or what we did, I guess, is unpack how they reacted to their past and what the things that were blocks to them. So it was somewhat of a storytelling thing. Like, what are the things you wish you could let go? What are the things you want to carry with you? How would your life be different if? What can you do as a parent that would remove some of the negative things and carry forth the legacy of your parents? So I see that story spine as a very powerful thing for people in prisons that have this story that kind of has seemed to stop to everybody else but to them, right? The story continues with them, but they're kind of stopped. So I recommend it. It's a very powerful experience. So did you guys, if you saw it, Jim put that in the chat, and I'm going to try to copy it real quick so I can but I never know how to do it.
I can send you a PDF of my presentation too, if you want to put that up.
Oh, that would be excellent. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd love to put that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really powerful tool. A piece we often use with it is called the circle of expectations, where I'll write a circle on the board or chart paper. And let's say if we're telling a science fiction story, inside the circle are like all the things the audience expects to see in science fiction. That tells them right away it's sci-fi, robots, lasers, aliens, etc.
Right on.
The things outside the circle are things that we might see in science fiction, but we don't necessarily expect it, or it doesn't communicate it right away, right? So the example I always use is Santa Claus. We did have the 1950s classic Santa Claus versus the Martians, which tells us that Santa Claus can be in a sci-fi movie, but it's not right away communicating sci-fi.
Right.
And to connect it to what we were just talking about, that's a tool that can be used also, like if we think about, let's say, people in a prison setting, like, think about the future you want. What's inside the circle? What do you want to see? What do you expect? What's outside the circle? The things you don't want to see or don't expect, right? Or if I'm creating, let's say, classroom norms or rules, like, what does it look like? What do we expect to see in a classroom where people respect each other? where they accept and support each other's ideas and they listen to each other. Let's put that in the circle and put other things outside the circle that we don't expect to see.
Right now.
So
cool. Well, I want to tie it up because it looks like Jim, I want to thank you so much. It looks like we're starting to, people are starting to go off. They've kind of gotten to the tune. I wanted to just say thank you so much for being open and for willing to do it. What a great presentation. We'll make sure that we have it living on the website so people can be directed there and check it out for themselves. And so let's give everybody his virtual applause to Jim. Give the sign language hand clap. I just want to have to do the regular housekeeping. We have another event coming up on Friday, which is a chat about the film The Black Cat. You can view the movie at Canopy through the library, and it is a horror movie. So I'm just letting you know, and it is rated R. It's the only rated R film that we have, but a film of vengeance and reanimation, Italian style. So if you want to check that out, you can go to Canopy. You have to have a card, and you got to watch it on Canopy, and then you can come to the chat and you can talk with us. Professor Albie Scott, Professor Tucky, and I will be there talking about certain pieces. And then on the 13th, I just want to let you know we have a local artist named Devon Camel that's going to be talking with us, doing a pencil drawing about reanimation of mechs. He does like the big Robotech type of mechanized stuff. So he's going to do a full drawing of like a zombie mech for us. And you can talk to Devon about his experiences. He's an independent African-American artist, published a couple of comic books in the area, self-publishing. So you can talk about him, what that takes like, and kind of the grind. Like I think Jim said it best, takes work to do stuff. So some people think, oh, you just do a comic and it's good. And so he's going to tell you it's really dedicated and hard work. And then we have the 20th, which is one of our keynote spots, is with Stephen Bissett. He was the artist for Swamp Thing. Let me just give you a quick preview there. I got the original Swamp Thing drawing from House of Secrets number 92. You can't see it so hot, but he's going to be there. And he did the run with Alan Moore, who is the guy that did Free for Vendetta, Watchmen, and did From Hell. He's well known for those. So he had a very close working relationship with him. So come and check them all out. They're all on jacksonconcon.org. They're in events, and you can get more cool events like this that we have with Jim. So everybody have a great day. Let us know what you think. Visit our Facebook page. We do have some swag masks left. So if I see that you go to our Facebook page and add, I'll send you a Concatenation mask. You can see the example over on Facebook. Thank you to Professor Albie Scott and Professor Tucky, and thank you for everybody coming. We'll see you soon in the ConCon Lounge.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks a lot. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks a lot, Jim.